Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Counting on Chazin, the series that strengthens nonprofits. I'm really excited today because we have Chris Bavolack, Director of Finance and Operations, in the hot seat today with us. Chris, welcome. This is a big topic that you and I off camera have spoken about, and that's the high level role of a nonprofit board. And it's a tricky thing, isn't it?
It is, and it's a huge topic. You could spend much more time than 30 minutes on this, but hopefully we'll hit some of the high points and give some nonprofit CEOs some things to think about.
I think so. I'm really excited to learn from you, kind of like how you see this play out. But before we do that, talk to me about Chazin and Company and where you're working and how you work with nonprofits.
Well, we're a virtual outsourced accounting firm for nonprofits. That's all we do is accounting for nonprofits. We're actually not a traditional audit and tax firm. We don't do audit. We don't do tax. We prepare our clients for audit. We prepare what they need to file the taxes, but we come in and help them run compliant, efficient, and effective accounting processes.
Amazing, amazing. So, I think when I think about Chazin and Company, it seems to me like you're helping us to figure out things that we shouldn't be doing or that we should be doing so that we're not doing corrective things with our accounting providers. And part of counting on Chazin, I think, helps kind of illuminate some of those best practices and things that we should be talking about. Again, I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I'm here to join in this conversation. And Chris, I love all things board related. That's kind of like my sweet spot because it's a grand mystery. It's the lifeblood of an organization. If you don't have a good functioning board and board system, you get a lot of other problems. And so let's start off by talking about these roles that we talk about with nonprofits. Why is this such a hard thing for us to understand? Is my first question probably. And then what do some of these roles look like when we're putting together a board?
Well, I think everybody's passionate about the nonprofits that they serve. They want the mission to be accomplished. They want the organization to be a success. So everyone tries to dive in and do what they can to make that happen. But I think you have to think about the board and the staff and even the volunteers, partners, all as a team, and everybody has a role in that team. And we know with sports, right? Every player has a role to play, and if everybody plays their role effectively, then you're going to succeed. And the same is true with this relationship between the board and the staff. So it's really important that the board understands what their role is in overseeing the organization, helping to guide the organization, and what the staff's role, so what the board's role is not, so that everybody's effective and efficient in getting the job done.
So I'm going to ask this question because I'm curious about this. I mean, with what you said, it was beautifully spoken, very easy to understand. But in theory, and when you work with a lot of organizations, do you feel that nonprofits in our country understand this? I mean, are they struggling with this, or do you feel like people going into it really understand this?
Now, I think, particularly for a new CEO in the nonprofit space, whether they've started the organization themselves or whether they're coming into an already established organization, no, it's not. You're not born with the knowledge on how to manage the relationship with the board and what everybody should do. So I think some guidance is important, and from both sides. I mean, I think the members of the board, particularly the chair of the board, the treasurer, the vice chair, secretary, if there is one, and the CEO, they all have to be on the same page as to what everybody's role is to be effective. And that can change based on the type of nonprofit, the size of the nonprofit, the personalities on the board, the personalities on the staff. So there's a lot of factors here. It's not like just black and white, but it is something that needs to be worked on.
hmm Yeah, I like that you're pointing this out because you're right. It is it's a family that continues to grow and change,
Mhm.
and you deal with them when they're young and you in one way, and you deal with them when they're teenagers and then when they're grown children. I mean, yeah, I like kind of like how you talked about this. But let's start from the very beginning and talk to me a little bit about assembling the board. I feel like a lot of times, especially with startups, they're like your best friend, your neighbor, your
Mhm.
uncle who might have, a bigger checkbook than everyone else in the family, or it doesn't seem like we um, get maybe the best people for the talents that we need. And if you could help us to kind of understand assembling the board, the importance of that, that would be good.
Yeah, and what you described is okay for a new nonprofit, for a small nonprofit. Yeah, that's who you're going to get, people who are hopefully passionate, interested in what you're trying to accomplish. But small nonprofits just getting started, they're difficult. So you really try to get whoever you can on the board to help you out and move things forward. And usually it's people again that are really passionate about the mission and trying to get things going. As you grow, you really have to think strategically about the members of your board. Do you have the right skill sets on the board? And from my personal sort of interest, what often gets left out is the finance or the accounting expertise. Because let's say you're in an arts board, and maybe it's dance, and you have former dancers and choreographers and directors and people like that, and the financials come up, and everybody's like, I have no idea what that is. That's just. So certainly, I'm going to propose that you have, at least one or two people on your board that are strong in the finance and the accounting area. And if they're strong in the finance and accounting area in the for-profit, then that that some work is done to bring them to understand what the nuances of the nonprofit space are. But you really do need those people that you can count on that understand the financial statements, what they're reading, the health of the organization, and all of that. But then beyond that, you need to think about what are the other players that are important to us. So if you are an arts organization, you certainly do want to have some people who know the art space very well, on your board. If you're a geographically dispersed organization, do you need to have people from different geographic areas? If you're an age dispersed organization, do you need to have representative of people at different age groups? Gender, of course. The people you're serving, partners is a good thing to think about. Are there key partners that you work with to fulfill your mission that should be on your board too, a representative of those organizations? There's lots of things to think about. And of course, what's also going to come along with this is the size of your board, which is a whole nother topic. But you do want to have the right number of people representing the key constituency, interests, and strategic needs of your board.
I love how you phrase that. And I'll tell you what is one of the big things for me is I live in a community that has a very large Spanish speaking population. And I am horrified by the number of boards, significant organizations, significant size, significant budgets that serve Spanish speaking people with nobody on the board that speaks Spanish. And
Right.
it's not that they're going to go out in the field and they're going to do work or that way, but man, language in this diverse country of ours, we don't think about that enough when we talk about cultural diversity. But the language piece has got to be something that we're thinking about, because ultimately our boards get further and further away from the people that they serve,
Exactly.
and understanding that. And so I feel like that's something we need to start talking about more and more. And that's just my own little, I guess, bugaboo
No,
thing.
and I'll just add to that. I mean, and I'm not trying to make it sound easy. It is work
Yeah.
putting a board together because usually what you fall into, it's a friend of a friend. Somebody else on the board knows somebody who wants to be a board, or you work with somebody who knows somebody who wants, but those might not be the people you need. So truly going out and finding the people you need is a significant task for the CEO.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that's really important. We keep banding about this word high level, the high level work of the board, the high level role. But what does that mean? And if you could explain
Mhm.
the issue of fiduciary responsibility, I think that might help us to understand why the board is different from the rest of the C-suite, or how we live in the management space, if you will.
Yeah. The board really does have, legal fiduciary responsibility for the organization. And that means, the success of the organization, the viability of the organization, um, the compliance, making sure there's no fraud, things like that. The board is ultimately responsible for that. And, it's not, you can't use the excuse, well, I didn't get the information, so I didn't know, that's an important thing to remember, which really ties into this because that's key to the relationship between the staff and the board and the dissemination of information, the sharing of information and all that. But the board is that high level fiduciary responsibility, strategic direction, guidance, sort of mission driven level of the organization. They're not the nuts and the bolts. They're not the day to day. That's what the CEO's role is to run the organization. And so it's really important that board members who have really limited time to spend with an organization throughout a year. I mean, even if you have a 2-day board meeting 4 times a year, it's 8 days a year.
Right.
They really have to spend their time wisely and focus on the areas that are pertinent to their leadership.
Yeah, I love that you said that because you're right. When you just look at it on paper and you think about time served, wow, it's
Mhm.
even if you're a really you have an aggressive meeting and committee schedule, it's still not a lot of time in relationship to what it takes to run an organization. So we talk about these roles, and Chris, you've really helped all of us understand where these things lie. But let's talk specifically about the CEO role and if we could kind of understand that separation. And
Mhm.
so let's start with budget oversight, because this is kind of one of those things that we we often talk about, but then we don't. And so let's maybe start with the CEO management role and begin with that budget piece.
Yeah, and I think this is an important piece, and it's also an area that can get muddled very easily. And it can get muddled for a couple of reasons. But the CEO is ultimately responsible for managing the budget of the organization once it's been approved by the board of directors. So it's important that the CEO has the latitude to do that.
Okay.
And questions often come to me or come up when someone says, well, is the CEO allowed to, move funds around within the budget? And I would say generally, yes, they should be. They're working towards maybe a certain bottom line. Maybe there's a little bit of leniency in the budget that they have some flexibility there.
Mhm.
But the pandemic is a great example. Think about how organizations had to turn on a dime when the pandemic, and if you had to have a board meeting every time a decision needed to be made on how the budget needed to be adjusted, how efficient would that be? It wouldn't be. So the executive director, they're the ones that are involved in the day-to-day, seeing how the organization is going and what it needs to do to adjust to changing market impacts, changing environmental impacts. And so they should have the flexibility to manage the budget in that way. So, one of the things I really urge against is starting out the financial part of a board meeting and saying, okay, now we're gonna go and review every line of the financial statement. No, that's not a good use of your time. That's the staff's job to do that. Um, what you want the board to do is to look at the balance sheet for sure. That's a very important statement. It's a statement of financial position for nonprofits. Um, they need to understand the financial viability of the organization, the financial health of the organization, not just the numbers today, but in comparison to the recent past as well.
Mhm.
That's a key indicator statement for them. And there are other key indicators that can be pulled out from the financial statements to have the board focus on without looking at every line in the budget. Okay. So let your CEO manage the budget. Of course, The board is responsible for hiring the CEO. If the CEO is not effectively doing their job, then the board can make a change.
Mhm.
But they need to have the flexibility to do that. Resource allocation is another thing that, whether it's financial resources or human resources, that the CEO, again, that's their job to manage, and whether they need to put more human resources into one area versus another area to effectively deliver the mission. Whether they, again, need to move money around, again, that's their role. Now, I'm not saying they have blanket carte blanche to do this at every level and every amount. Of course,
Yeah,
anything
sure.
significant, and the board and the CEO need to come to this agreement of what amount this is, but significant changes should be at least run by the treasurer, the finance committee, and then finally approved by the board. But again, that flexibility needs to be there. The last thing that I think is key is staffing, and the CEO is the manager of the staff, and the board should not have any part of that at all. And I've unfortunately been on boards where members have called staff members and talked to them about what they should be doing, and then the staff member is all out of sorts because they don't know who to listen to. So again, so this is a little bit of kind of staying in your lane. The CEO runs the organization, they run they manage the budget, they run the resources, they manage the staff, and the board has that high level oversight of all those areas to make sure that the CEO is doing their job.
So then, in essence, I love how you described this. I think it was very precise and concise. Now, flip that over to the board role, because if you think about this, the CEO is working for the board, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
technically, that's really the way to be looking at this. So, if the if the board doesn't feel like things are going the way they should be going, it's really the CEO in the hot seat, not going to the direct C-suite people and talking to them,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. The CEO, again, is the overseer of all that has to do with the day-to-day operations of the organization. And if something is not going well, the budget's not being managed properly, or staff isn't getting their work done and nothing seems to be done about it, then yeah, it's between the board and the CEO then.
It's really an important thing. Now, you did a beautiful job laying out these roles and helping us to understand what we should be doing. But honest to goodness, there's still confusion. And there's still things that happen that kind of leak into the ecosystem of you.
Mm-hmm.
I loved how you said staying in our lane. So, what advice can you give us about ending this confusion? What can we do so that we are staying in our lanes from the get-go? Maybe that's the way to say it, so that we understand, and we're moving in the right direction.
So I think there's three things that really need to be looked at, and that's the agenda of your meetings and the information that's provided in the meetings. It's
Mhm.
how the meetings are managed and run by the leadership. And it's typically the board leadership, the board chair, the vice chair, the treasurer, how those meetings are run. And
Mhm.
then lastly, the information that the board gets to understand their roles, whether it's board job descriptions or a board orientation, initially when they're coming onto the board. So they go in understanding what they should be focused on and what they really shouldn't be focused on.
Yeah. So, um, I've got to ask another question to this, because during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
virtually all of our boards had to move into the digital arena, using digital communications, doing their meetings differently. We're still in this struggle about, do we come back IRL in real life to meet? And I'm seeing, I don't know about you, but more and more use of board portals whereby all the information is uploaded so that the board members in an efficient way, whether they open them or not is another question, but all of the information and the data should be pushed out well before the meeting is starting. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if you can talk about that a little bit to us, because it seems to me if you're a CEO and you're trying to stay in your lane and keep the board in their lane, if they are not engaging with the information that you're providing them, you're not going to get a well-run meeting, or you're going to be bouncing the agenda around. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that's sort of the big question is what's the right amount of information and what's the right information.
Okay.
I come from the days of mailing out thick board packets to board members who would say they would read them on the plane and really wouldn't, and they'd be kind of reading them during the meeting and all that.
Mhm.
So it's really important to have a digestible amount of information
Yeah.
and to make sure it's the key information that the board needs to look at.
Yeah.
And maybe, maybe they don't get the whole income statement. Maybe that's the treasurer and the finance committee that deals with that. And what the board says is just a dashboard of key financial indicators that they need to look at to understand, again, the health of the organization. The other thing is important is placement. I came from a day when the finance report was like always the first report everybody did, and it took the longest, and everybody else in the rest of the organization was frustrated because they never get to talk about the mission stuff. So how you organize your meeting is important too. What do you put up front? What do you highlight as the most important? And if you can keep your finance reports, again, digestible and just focusing on key indicators and things like that, they can be very short unless there's something that really needs to be dealt with, but they've been kept really short so you can talk about other mission centric topics for the organization. So I think, I mean, in digital, we're not copying hundreds and hundreds of sheets anymore when it's digital. So maybe the temptation is to put more out there, but you don't want to overwhelm your board members. You want them to have what they need to read in a size they can read it so that they can come prepared.
Yeah, you know what? I like that clarification, because I think I probably, you said something pretty magical, and that is because it's easy, you can just be like, we're going to upload all this stuff. And then the reality is what's your board going to tackle, and what are they going to go through? And
Mhm.
what are they going to retain? Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm very glad. Hey, another thing before we move on, I want to go back, maybe it is, and talk about this board orientation, because it seems to
Mhm.
me that a lot of this, if we could kind of structure up what it is that we're doing, or how we expect our boards to work and um, lead, that we could help save some angst for all of
Yeah.
us. Talk about board orientation.
Yeah, I think that, and they've been evolving over the years. And again, it needs to be tailored to your organization, but it's really a great opportunity to introduce new board members to the organization, to the staff, to other board members. I'm not suggesting necessarily that every board member attends every orientation, but I think you want to have with the new board members, a few existing board members as part of the orientation as well, so that
Yeah.
they can share their experiences and their thinking on how board meetings should run and what you should be focusing on. You could have a board manual that may lay out, again, information about the organization. It might have some sample financial information and some notes there as to how to look at it as well. Again, a lot more information about the organization. If there's key board policies, for instance, if there need to be travel policies for board members or conflict of interest, things like that, that can be included in the either or the handbook and the board orientation. It's sort of covering everything soup to nuts that a new board member should know, so that when they are starting, they're not just starting from zero and trying to figure out what's going on. You might even, if the board chair is part of it, they might even take them through a sample agenda to say, these are the types of things that we talk about, and this is what we're trying to achieve, with each of these agenda items and all of that.
Yeah, that's super smart. I have never heard about that on a board training module, but I love that. I love that concept, because you started off by helping us frame this up by, you might only meet a handful of times a year. And so you don't want to waste any meetings. You want to get these people in and up to speed so that they can be performing for your organization.
Right. I just want to add, you obviously don't want to the organization doesn't want to waste the time they have with their board members because it's limited. Board members don't want their time wasted either. And they need to leave feeling that it was productive,
Mhm.
that they learned what they need to learn, and they feel good about the organization and where it is. I mean, it doesn't mean it doesn't have challenges. All organizations have challenges, but they understand what those are and what the next steps are and how they're going to be involved, if they're going to be involved, and all that. So you don't want to waste board members drop off if they feel like
Yeah.
their time's just not being used well.
Absolutely. So this has been amazing. You've really taken us through this journey, Chris, about what we should be looking at, how we should be understanding our roles, and really staying in the lane of the board versus CEO, C-suite management. But there are exceptions. So let's drill down a little bit to that, because you talk about this with in kind of in tandem with the growth of an organization. And we
Mm-hmm.
started off by saying, a lot of these people are their passion projects, and founder syndrome and all these other things that we talk about. How does the context of growth and that's life cycle, if you will, of an organization dovetail to this concept of understanding the roles?
Yeah, I think, the life stage of the organization is important. There are a lot of small or newer not nonprofits that don't have a lot of staff, and they really rely on the board members to help out with some of the day-to-day responsibilities.
Yeah.
It might be someone who knows accounting, keeping the books. It might be people who help put together a fundraiser or help deliver food, to the needy. Um, and in that case, they're a little bit more engaged in the day to day of the operation, and they need to be because the resources just aren't there, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine, and it's understandable. I think the challenge then becomes is if the organization grows and they get to the point where they start to hire more staff and they have more people to do those or to fulfill those roles, the transition of the board from being that doing board to that oversight board.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy because the people who've been doing probably like doing it and they want to continue to do it.
Right.
So there's a thin line to walk there. But as the organization grows and the board grows and it becomes more strategic and the staff grows, then you really have to think about transitioning to that oversight role for the board and that day-to-day operations role for the staff.
It's kind of interesting. It's almost like listening to you talk about this, it seems so logical and natural, but when you're in it, it might be hard to recognize. And this might be a time for an organization to almost, how you use that description in the narrative of, board training or that piece to at some point infuse another discussion about what the organization needs and what the roles should be looking like. Because I loved what you said, and this is a really interesting thing for me. Doers love to do. And so if you have those folks that maybe are part of a founding board or in the startup phase where they are working with clients and they're doing the labor of the organization, and then it shifts, that could be kind of a perilous time.
Yeah, it can be. And, maybe then you're looking more volunteer model and all that, because volunteers are very, very engaged and involved in the nonprofits that they serve. And you
Yeah.
don't want to lose that. So you want to make sure that you can still keep the people engaged that are passionate about your organization, so they feel good about things. But again, make the structural changes you might need to make to serve a growing organization.
Wow. Well, Chris Bavolack, Director of Finance and Operations for Chazin and Company. I quote you often, my friend. I do, and because Chris has been with us on Counting on Chazin, on some other episodes. If you ever want to understand the magic of the 990, check out that video that we did as part of this series, because Chris really helped explain the whole ecosystem and the power of that. But yeah, you've got an amazing team. A lot of the team members have come on Counting on Chazin, and we discuss all different things. And so check out some of these other videos. It's a really interesting thing in this series. This access to this content is free. You do not have to be a client of Chazin and Company to get this, which is pretty remarkable because this is a lot of really valuable information. And most organizations will have some sort of tie into this. But Chazin and Company has made the commitment with their Counting on Chazin series to help educate the sector so that we can all be achieving our mission, vision, and values. Chris, it's been an amazing journey. I always love what you have to say because there's always something new for me to learn, and that is fabulous. You can find Chris along with so many other members of his team directly from their website at chazinandcompany.com. And if you just want to go right to the series and see all of the different episodes that are on Counting on Chazin, you can go to countingonchazin.com as well. Chris, this has been great. You've really fueled some ideas for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Have a good day, everyone, and we'll see you again on another episode of Counting on Chazin.